I never meant to come home that night. Flying was supposed to keep me away until morning, but the storm over the Rockies forced an early landing. My uniform still smelled of the cabin when I pulled into the driveway in Denver, headlights reflecting off the rain that hadn't stopped since dusk. I remember thinking how quiet the street looked, like a photograph frozen in time. When I opened the front door, the house wasn't quiet at all. Laughter drifted from the living room. It was soft at first, like the kind that slips through walls when you're not supposed to hear it. I followed the sound until I saw Laura standing there, wearing her long beige coat and a touch of red lipstick she saved for special occasions. She was on the phone, her voice low, warm, and too familiar for a business call. She turned quickly when she saw me, almost dropping her purse. "Henry," she said, forcing a smile. "You're home early." "Storm grounded us," I replied. "Who were you talking to?" Her fingers tightened around her phone. "Just the restaurant. There's a meeting tonight about the new promotion." I looked at the clock above the fireplace. 9:15. "A meeting at this hour?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her car keys on the table. The sound of metal clinking against wood felt louder than thunder. I stood there, trying to catch her eyes, but she avoided mine. "If you walk out that door tonight," I said quietly, "I won't wait for you to come back." It wasn't anger in my voice. It was something colder, something final. Laura froze for half a second, then opened the door and disappeared into the rain. I stood there listening to the wind against the windows. The house felt hollow without her voice echoing through it. I sat on the couch, staring at our wedding photo on the shelf. The frame was dusty, like it hadn't been touched in years. In that photo, she was laughing, sunlight in her hair, eyes full of promises we both thought we could keep. Now the room felt like a lie. The minutes stretched into hours. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the rain slowing down, and the clock ticking too loudly. I tried watching television, then turned it off. Every sound felt like a memory I didn't want to hear. By midnight, my phone lit up with a single notification. A purchase alert from our joint credit card, Cherry Creek Boutique Hotel, 2 entrees of Italian cuisine, and a bottle of champagne. My chest tightened. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at the glowing screen in the dark, letting the truth sink in. Then, without a word, I stood, grabbed my flight bag, and packed a few things. My uniform, my watch, my passport, old habits from years of leaving. As I walked out, the night felt colder than before. Denver slept quietly, but I couldn't. I drove through empty streets until I reached my friend Noah's apartment on the east side of town. He was another pilot, the kind who understood silence better than words. When he opened the door, he didn't ask questions. He just nodded, moved aside, and let me in. That night, I lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. The storm outside had stopped, but the one inside me had just begun. I didn't know it then, but that was the last night I'd ever think of our home as mine. Morning came too bright for a night that dark. Noah had already left for his early flight, leaving me alone in his small apartment with nothing but the sound of planes passing overhead. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching clouds move across the Denver skyline. Each one looked like a place I'd rather be, anywhere but here. 3 days had passed since Laura walked out, and I hadn't heard a word. Not a call, not a message, nothing. I'd spent most of those days trying to convince myself it didn't matter, that I was better off. But silence has a way of talking louder than words. On the second night, I drove past our old house. The curtains were drawn, the lights off. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just kept driving, looping through familiar streets that suddenly felt like someone else's memories. By the third day, I was back at the airport, running through the motions, flight checks, weather reports, briefings. Everything felt mechanical. The sky had always been my escape, but even up there, thousands of feet above the world, I couldn't get away from her face. That night, I sat on Noah's couch scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one of Laura laughing with flour on her nose from a night we tried baking pizza together. She hated cooking, but she did it because I asked. I remember her saying, "You fly people across the world, Henry. Let me fly this dough for you." We'd laughed until the smoke alarm went off. I closed the photo and set the phone face down. The silence of that small apartment pressed against me. I missed the sound of her humming when she cleaned, the way she always left her coffee half-finished on the counter, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. But then I remembered the hotel charge. Cherry Creek Boutique. The champagne. The laughter I heard before she left. My jaw tightened. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of wondering. At midnight, I walked outside. The cold air hit my face, crisp and heavy with the smell of rain. The city lights shimmered below the dark sky. I looked up and tried to remember the feeling of flying, the calm that came with knowing exactly where you were going. Now, I had no direction. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. A note from Noah was on the counter. You can stay as long as you need, brother. Just don't lose yourself in the clouds. I smiled faintly. Easy advice for a man who lived in the sky. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to chase her, and I wasn't going to wait. I called the airline and asked for more flight hours, anything to stay moving. When I was flying, I didn't have to think. Up there it was just me, the hum of the engines, and the horizon. But even as I climbed into the cockpit that morning, I caught my reflection in the glass. My eyes looked different, older, harder. Somewhere between takeoff and the clouds, I realized that part of me was still on the ground, standing in that empty living room, watching her walk away. I thought the silence would fade. It didn't. It only grew louder. And by the end of that week, I knew something was coming. Something that would break the silence once and for all. It was early Monday morning when I saw her again. The terminal was alive with movement, people rushing, announcements echoing, luggage wheels rattling across the tiles. I was reviewing a flight manifest at the counter when I heard a familiar voice say my name. Henry. I turned slowly. Laura stood there, hair slightly disheveled, makeup smudged beneath tired eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled as she gripped her purse, eyes darting around as if searching for words that didn't exist. I stayed silent. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded once, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear it for myself. We moved to a quiet corner near the observation windows, where sunlight poured through the glass and planes lifted into the sky one after another. She spoke first. Henry, I made a mistake. Her voice cracked. That night, I wasn't honest. I wasn't going to any meeting. I was with someone. I didn't flinch. I already knew. She continued, her words tumbling out faster now. His name is Daniel. He owns the new restaurant downtown. He told me he could help me get promoted, that he saw potential in me. I believed him. I thought it meant something, but it didn't. It was just a lie. All of it. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, I saw the same woman I'd once promised forever to. I looked out the window. A jet roared overhead, its engines drowning out the noise of the terminal. You flew too high, Laura, I said quietly, with someone who didn't know where he was going. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Henry, please. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. I quit the job. I ended things with him. I just want us back. I let her words hang in the air, heavy and desperate. For years I'd imagined what betrayal might feel like, anger, pain, shouting, but standing there, I felt none of it. Just emptiness. You already lost me, I said, my voice calm, too calm. That night when you walked out, I waited for you to turn around. You never did. And that silence, that's where we ended. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please, Henry. Don't say that. But I didn't. I just looked at her one last time, the woman who had shared my home, my dreams, my life, and then turned away. As I walked back toward the gates, I felt the weight of finality settle over me. Laura stood behind the glass wall, watching me leave, her reflection lost among strangers moving in every direction. When I reached the tarmac, the wind hit me hard. Planes stood lined up under the morning sun, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was just acceptance, the kind that comes when you stop fighting what's already gone. I boarded the plane, put on my headset, and focused on the checklist. The radio crackled with static as the control tower cleared us for takeoff. As the engines roared and the aircraft lifted off the ground, I looked down at the city below, at the streets, the houses, the tiny lives moving on without me. Somewhere in that maze of lights was the woman I used to love, standing alone. And for the first time, I didn't look back. Weeks passed like clouds drifting across a slow sky. After the divorce papers were signed, I moved into a small apartment in Boulder, a quiet place overlooking the foothills, where nights were colder but the air felt easier to breathe. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped inside my own home. I spent my mornings flying and my evenings sitting on the balcony, a cup of black coffee in hand, watching the city lights flicker beneath the endless Colorado sky. The stars always reminded me of flight, thousands of tiny destinations scattered in the dark, each one untouchable yet strangely familiar. Sometimes, I thought about Laura. Not with anger, not even regret, just a quiet understanding of how fragile we'd become long before the night I found out. Love, I realized, doesn't collapse all at once. It fades, slowly and silently, until one day you notice you've been living beside a stranger. One evening, Noah came over. He leaned against the railing, a beer in his hand, watching the skyline with me. "So this is the new captain's nest," he joked. "More like a layover," I said, smiling faintly. He studied me for a moment. "You seem different, Henry. Lighter." I took a sip of coffee. Maybe I am. When you lose everything you thought you needed, you start to see what really matters. He nodded, not pressing further. Pilots understood the value of silence. It was the space between words where truth usually lived. Later that night, after he left, I stood alone on the balcony. The wind carried the faint scent of pine from the mountains. I closed my eyes and listened, to the distant sound of traffic, to the faint hum of life continuing without me, to the whisper of peace slowly finding its way in. My phone buzzed once on the table inside. A message from Laura. Just one line, "I hope you're happy, Henry." I didn't reply. I deleted it, then set the phone down beside the half-empty mug. Some stories don't need a final word. Some endings are quieter than you expect. Above me, a plane crossed the sky, its lights blinking red and white against the blackness. I could almost hear the steady rhythm of its engines, the same rhythm that had guided me through years of turbulence, both in the air and on the ground. I smiled. That was my world, motion, distance, direction. And for once, I didn't feel lost. I looked up at the stars again. The sky hadn't changed. It was the same one Laura and I used to gaze at together, the same one I'd flown beneath for decades. But now, it felt different. The same sky. A different heart. I breathed in the night, calm and endless. Then I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear, "Here's to freedom, and to never waiting for someone who's already gone." The wind carried the words away, dissolving them into the dark. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing the horizon.